and I wanted to spend some time responding to a video that I saw from the YouTube username, I think is the Gay Christian Network, and I guess he did a video called "Is Homosexuality an Abomination?" And he went out to prove from that point that homosexuality is, I was really a little confused because he claimed that the act that homosexuals do with each other was not a sin, but somehow you could be gay, but as long as you don't do things that gay people do, you're not sinning. So I was a little confused about that. So I've taken some notes here about some things I want to say in response. I initially want to say that homosexuality is an abomination. The Bible is so overwhelmingly clear about that. I want to seek to prove why the Old Testament moral law exists today and is relevant. I also want to show that homosexuality has always been and will always be a sin. So, let's get started. Now, I quickly want to say I'm very disappointed in the individual who approves comments for the Gay Christian Network. And since the word network's in the title, I have no idea if this is one person or many. I've only seen 2 or 3 of the videos that had the same person, so maybe it's just one. But anyway, the point is I left 2 comments very, 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 very concisely saying what I'm going to say in this video. It was not crude, it was not lewd, there was no hatred in it. It was just facts that there are 3 portions of the law, as I'm going to explain, and that homosexuality has been and will be, and here's the objective case as to why. So I'm very disappointed in this person for not approving my comments. Now, I have my website set up to approve comments as well, mainly because of potty mouth and people making repetitive comments or off-topic comments. So I have no problem with people approving comments, but if it is on topic, it's not repetitive, and there's no potty mouth, I think they ought to approve it. But again, hey, it's their channel. They can decide, but I did notice a consistency that he only seemed to approve comments that agreed with his position. Anybody looking at my videos could never, ever make that accusation of me. First thing I want to say, that while I believe it's a sin, I do not endorse any type of violence against homosexuals. None whatsoever. That's not the New Testament example Jesus Christ gave in Luke chapter 9. And while certain things are sin, it doesn't mean we go around hating those people or treating them any differently. I even did a video concerning this topic called "Dear Christian, Picking on Homosexuals is Wrong," if you'd like to reference that. I was not defending homosexuality as a legitimate Christian lifestyle. I was saying that picking one abomination out of a list of many that the Bible makes, and then picking on that one, is inconsistent and wrong. Now, a lot of people will say, when you call homosexuality sin, they'll say, "You're homophobic." Well, fear really doesn't have anything to do with it. It's the truth of God and the truth of the issue which is at hand. I also think stealing is wrong. Does that mean I'm thiefophobic? It really doesn't make a lot of sense for just because someone disagrees with homosexuality being a legitimate Christian lifestyle that they're somehow a hater or they hate those particular people. That kind of logic does not follow. A lot of people try to say that because Jesus really didn't talk about homosexuality in the Gospels, that this was some kind of implicit endorsement of the lifestyle, that because the only restrictions seem to be in Romans chapter 1 and maybe one other New Testament passage that I can't think of right now, and in majority would be the Old Testament, that somehow this was part of the law that Christians are no longer required to keep. So let's deal with that misnomer right now. Point number 1, I took some notes here. Jesus, if you're going to use the argument that because Jesus did not explicitly condemn homosexuality and therefore he implicitly endorsed it, you also, if you're going to be consistent, since Jesus didn't also explicitly talk about necrophilia, pedophilia, abortion, pornography, child abuse, spouse abuse, bestiality, are those also okay now? Because Jesus didn't explicitly deal with it? I don't think anybody would say that. Point number 2, John 24:25 states, quote, "And there are also many other things which Jesus did, the which, if they should be written every one, I suppose that even the world itself could not contain the books that should be written." So we cannot argue from silence, but neither can you. So while Jesus did not explicitly deal with it, we also know that we don't have any proof that he didn't, because not everything he did was written down. And continuing that thought to a little further, Matthew 5:17, Jesus says, "Think not I am come to destroy the law of the prophets. I'm not come to destroy, but to fulfill." So here's my challenge. If Jesus fulfilled the law on our behalf, then would he not have had to obey it? And the law says it's wrong. If the law says something wrong, and he says certain things are right, and Jesus fulfilled the law on our behalf, he would have had to obey the law. So while we don't know everything Jesus did, we do know this one thing, that anything Jesus would have done conformed to the law. Number 3, Romans 7:7 states, Paul speaking, "What shall we say then? Is the law sin? God forbid. Nay, I had not known sin but by the law. For I had not known lust except the law had said, Thou shalt not covet." So Paul, speaking in the New Testament, in a New Testament context, said that something in the Old Testament was a sin, and in fact he would not have known it was a sin had the law not told him. So I'm covering a lot of points here, but I've got to lay a groundwork, and I want you to stick with me on this and listen to the whole point. In conclusion, and I'm going to quote from an article I wrote about this called Homosexuality in the Bible. Quote, "This verse, talking about Romans 7:7, says it all. Without the Old Testament, how would we know what God considers a sin? The verse plainly states that the knowledge of what is considered a sin is provided in the law. With both of these verses, I have made the same point, and now it should be clear that, number 1, the law of Moses, given to Moses by God, dictates to us what God considers a sin, even for New Testament believers. We're not under the judgments of the law, but the law serves to tell us what is sin. This is indeed at the very heart of the matter, because the law very clearly states that homosexuality is a sin. And were we under the law, would be punishable by death. So what of the law? This brings us to another issue. You'll hear many times by atheists especially, why are you Christians wearing clothes with more than one fabric, and why are you eating ham sandwiches, and blah 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 blah. And this is especially disappointing coming from a lot of people who call themselves former Christians. I have to wonder what kind of Christianity they were exposed to. There are 3 parts to the laws of Moses. Almost all your laws fall into one of these 3 categories. There's the judicial, the ceremonial, and the moral. The judicial law, the ceremonial law, and the moral law. And these distinctions are very plain in Scripture, if you want to see them. Let me quote again here. Those things considered sins according to the moral law have always been and will always be sins or abominations, and we are no longer under the judicial and ceremonial requirements of the law. And to see proof of this, you can see New Testament believers' judgment on this, Acts 10, Acts 15, and Romans 1:18 through 2:15. In other words, homosexuality, part of breaking the moral law, is a sin. However, the judgment to kill homosexuals, i.e. the judicial law, is no longer relevant. Why?